Hello everyone. Now I am here as a publisher. So before 2 years, when I was invited to Nicaragua for a Granada International Poetry Festival, I met two very different poets, wonderful poets. I mean, I met them, they gave me a book and came back to India. The one book was Night Badly Written by Victor Rodriguez Nunez. When I came here, I read the book. It's actually a bilingual book. I could not read the Spanish one, so I read English. And I found that this person, this poet, writes very, very differently. I mean, the kind of poetry in Marathi or Hindi or English which I can read, or in English translation from other languages, Bangla and others, I found that this poetry is different and it must be introduced to the younger generation here, because that is our kind of mission. With my wife Smriti, we have this mission, like bringing newer voices, fresh voices, and a wonderful poetry to India, and make this book available at a lower price. So that was how I found. He also gave me a book, and hopefully in near future we will launch that book too. It's also a fantastic, he is also a fantastic poet. Down after, and Katherine and Victor, they are going to speak to each other, read poetry. I will actually ask Kate to introduce him properly, because he is an important poet. That's like, it's a very important poet, and whatever audience here or maybe on the social media should know that there is a poet whose book they should buy.
Can you hear me? Yes. Well, before we begin talking, and before I introduce Victor, we both need to give a huge thank you to Poetry Wala, to Hemant and Shruti, for believing in this work, for thinking that it would have an audience here in India. We've been in India for almost 2 weeks, and we're headed back to the US tomorrow, but this has been an incredible experience for us. Our minds are expanded. We have learned so much, and it's a great honor to be able to be present here at GALF and to get to know the poetry community. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for believing in our work. It's humbling, and we're incredibly grateful. Would you like to?
Well, I don't want to repeat anything. And I think that the best that we can do is read some poems, and we will figure out after that.
Let me talk about you.
Okay.
Okay, we will read poems, no worries. But let me just give you a brief introduction to Victor. Victor Rodriguez Nunez was born in Havana in 1955. He did not grow up there. though. He grew up in a small sugar mill town in the center of the island. And this experience is what really nourished his poetry. He did not come from an intellectual family. He came from a working class family that were working in agriculture and then working at the sugar mill during the time of the harvest, sugar mill harvest. And so this is his life is based on poetry, but lived poetry, not written poetry. And I think that comes out quite a bit in his work. Just to give you an idea, he has over 50 books published. He has a major impact both in Latin America and in Spain. He has won numerous awards. He has won the most important award in Spain, in the Spanish language, for an unpublished book. He won that in 2016. His collections have been translated now into Arabic, Chinese, French, English, German, Hebrew, Italian, Macedonian, Serbian, and Swedish. He has been to every major poetry festival in the country, in the world, including now, but not in Mumbai, he says. He's read in more than over 40 countries, and in the past 10 years or so, he has made a major impact also in the English-speaking world. He has 7 books in translation now published. So as I said, he has been long well received in the Spanish-speaking world. He is also now well received in the English-speaking world and in other languages as well. And I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to me to translate his work. He was the first poet that I translated, and at a very young age, I have grown as a translator along with his poetry. I have become what I consider to be a poet through translating his work and the work of other Spanish-American poets. His work is by far my favorite to translate, though. A part of that is because as a couple, I know what he's writing about, so it makes it, to a certain extent, easier for me. But at the same time, he's just an amazing poet, and there's something that's just joyful about being able to translate really, really great poetry. And to kind of continue on with the conversation that we had at the earlier session, can you turn that off? Okay. This idea of expanding language through the art of translation. Victor's goal as a poet in Spanish is to also expand the Spanish language, so I feel that is my duty as his translator into English to also expand English. And I'd just like to read the last 2 paragraphs of my introduction to Inverse so that you have a little bit better idea of what I mean. To ask myself, as Rodriguez Nunez's translator into English, how to cross the borders of language with the same defiance found in the original, to avoid the trap of exotification, striking a balance between slang idioms, the strangeness of certain words unlikely to be associated with what is typically Cuban, and the similar strangeness of keeping words only a Cuban would understand. There are no italics here. The poems are written in just one language, a fluidity mirroring the poet's reluctance to choose just one meaning, just one discourse, just one identity. Inverse serves to introduce Indian readers to one of contemporary poetry's most relevant, powerful voices. These poems challenge every limit. Here, commitment and experimentation, emotion and lucidity, what is another's and our own, the writer and the reader, come together.
Thank you, Kate. This is wonderful. That's pure love, you know. It's even better than literary criticism or or anything else. Well, I'm absolutely happy to be here. We are a few, but we are the best. And that happened with poetry. Poetry is the only thing that capitalism has not been able to make a commodity. And this is just speak high. It's the best thing that happened to poetry. Sorry, Hemant, that you will be hard to sell books of poetry, but I think that, and the association of poetry with literature, I think that the worst definition, the less accurate definition of poetry is that poetry is a literary genre. Poetry is before literature. Literature is a French invention of 18th century. You know, even Shakespeare or Cervantes, Dante, they didn't know even that word that was invented by the Frenchies, you know. And everybody buy that, and this is that what in any case, literature is a poetic genre. It's in the other way. And poetry is not only before printing, before books, it's before writing. Poetry is oral. And if you as a poet are not conscious of that, if you as a poet think that you are doing literature, you are absolutely wrong. And we, in this festival, we have some space to, this festival is more open to poetry, but in general, I was in the Times of India Literary Festival, and there were like 100 panels, and there was just one on poetry. And that's what, well, we are getting, what, that's identity. You know, that's rejection is, make me, you know, more, you know, aware and more happier to be a poet. And I will have to do something that I don't like too much, is read from my cell phone, because I don't have copy of the poems in Spanish. I will start with an old poem. I will read in Spanish, and I have a beautiful voice in English that will be reading her translation. Entrada. No sé por qué camino, pero he llegado aquí, hasta este raro sitio sin casas ni paisaje, este lugar desnudo de las piedras al alma, donde el mundo germina. Quizás también tú llegas siguiendo ese camino, en esta vida harta de aciertos y certezas, solo el error nos une. La poesía es el reino de los equivocados.
Entrance. I don't know by which path, but I've arrived here, to this strange spot with no houses or scenery, this naked place from stones to soul where the world takes root. Perhaps you arrive too, following the path. In this life sated with success and certainty, only error joins us. Poetry is the realm of the mistaken.
I grew up in, I don't belong to any, I belong to a very poor family, workers, you know, peasants. I grew up in a house without books. Even there was not a Bible. They pretend, my family pretend to be Catholic, but they were even didn't have a Bible at home. And I was the first person in my family who attended university. And thanks to the Cuban Revolution, by the way. And but I grew up in a house without books, but that doesn't mean that I grew up in a house without poetry. Poetry was in the story that my grandma told me, my grandma Angelica told me. You know, and my favorite story by her was about the appearance in 1911 of the Halley comet. And when I was trying to be a poet and was trying to figure out what is a poet, I started reading autobiographies of poets. And I read La Arboleda Perdida by Rafael Alberti, the great Spanish poet. Wonderful book. And then for Alberti to see the Halley comet was something else. And he described that beautiful with the same words as my grandma. And that makes a very strong connection between my life and poetry, not literature. And so I wrote this poem. That's one of my oldest poems. Have had many titles because I change titles and change everything. I change the poems every time that I publish, basically. And this one, the last title is this, Prólogo a la Arboleda Perdida de Rafael Alberti. Cuando el cometa Halley, ese viejo maleante de los cielos, cruzó a navajazos el vientre de la noche, mi abuela, que aún no era la abuela de nadie en este mundo, soñó tener su limpia cabellera y puso en el mortero 6 huevos de gorrión que volvió, quién sabe cómo, polvo enamorado, para rehacer su rostro húmedo a la triste manera de la luna. Pero en otro rincón de este planeta que gira como un enjambre de avispas, cuando el cometa Halley guardaba en noche su navaja, un niño gaditano con ojos de bahía quiso peinar la rauda cabellera del cielo con su tridente de marinero en tierra firme. Ha tenido que pasar desesperado el siglo, han cicatrizado las heridas de la noche. El niño no es el niño, sino un viejo poeta del destierro que regresa. La abuela no es la abuela, sino una abeja que aguijonea el alma a otro niño que peina en el recuerdo la limpia cabellera de una noche del mundo.
Prologue to Rafael Alberti's The Lost Grove. When Halley's comet, old bandit of the skies, cut night's belly with its switchblade, my grandmother, who still wasn't the grandmother of anyone in this world, dreamt of clean hair and put 6 sparrow eggs in her mortar that became who knows how, dust enamored, to reshape her damp face in the sad way of the moon. Yet in another corner of this planet, spinning like a swarm of wasps, when Halley's comet put away its switchblade bloodied with night, a boy from Cadiz with bay-like eyes longed to comb sky's swift hair with his trident of a sailor on dry land. The century has had to pass desperately. Night's wounds have scarred. The boy is not the boy, but an old man, a banished poet returning. The grandmother is not the grandmother, but a bee stinging the soul of another boy who combs in his memory the clean hair of one night in the world.
Thank you. When I moved to the United States, I thought that I was moving to the first world. And I had supposedly a wonderful fellowship from the University of Oregon, but I discovered shortly that that fellowship wasn't enough. You know, that they have to find out a job and try to even work under the table. And there was a person who helped me a lot and gave me my first job in America. That was really an unusual job. I had to take care of dead cow. Dead cow, okay? And this is, the guy had like 200 cows, and he bought those cows in order to milk them and produce ice cream, but he never was able to get the license because United States is a mafia country, and there is the milk mafia too, that control all the milk production in the United States. You think that the United States is a democratic country. That's the less democratic country ever. You know, every law has a way to escape of the law. Why you pass a bill if there is always a way to avoid the bill? And they, in the Congress, they are really do a really good job with that. And well, the only way to solve the problem is it was wait of the cow die naturally, and then sell the cow to a plant that make food for dogs. And well, that was my job. And nearby the cows, I wrote a bunch of poems because I became in United States what I really are. It's a Cuban farmer. And the dog, you cannot, you know, run away from your identity. That's the lesson. Gritan y no respondes. Estás en la yema del aromal. Nadie te busca donde nada llega, ni siquiera los jíbaros guineos. A escondida fuiste abriendo camino una tarde con la camisa a cuadros. Lo único que cruza la espinera es la voz de tu madre. Meticuloso como un huracán te tiendes sobre las secas corolas bajo un cielo que deshojan las nubes como un cordón de hormigas y te desnudas solo para ti a esperar a los indios. En las encrucijadas hay un olor a madre, sudor cristalizado, penumbras en almíbar, un fehaciente cuchillo entre latas arrosas para café y manteca. Hay un sabor a madre en las encrucijadas, melazas en su luz, alma de arroz con leche. Un cuchillo que corta todo menos la esencia guayaba del Perú que maduran las moscas. El filoso destino de una madre que se puede envolver entre hojas de plátano. Un perro ante un librero en medio de las ruinas transparentes. El librero fue una obra del asma. Había sitio para la vieja alcusa, el manojo de albahaca, el cebo de carnero, pero la casa se cuajó de libros, el mal genio del polvo, la gotera puntual, imprevisible. El perro fue una obra de nadie, era un buen nadador, lo hacía todo hasta el último aliento. Le mordieron la oreja en la manigua, se lo comieron vivo los gusanos. Hoy haces cualquier cosa por no aullar.
They yell out, but you don't answer. You're in the yoke of a marabou patch. Nobody looks for you where nothing can go. Not even the guinea hens running wild. In secret, you cleared a path one evening with your plaid shirt. The only thing to get past the thorns is the voice of your mother. Meticulous like a hurricane, you spread out over the dry corollas. Below a sky stripped of leaves by the clouds like a string of ants, and you undress only for you to await the Indians. At the crossroads, there's a smell of mother crystallized sweat, shadows in simple syrup, an irrefutable knife between encrusted cans for coffee and lard. There's a taste of mother at the crossroads, molasses in its light, rice pudding soul, a knife to cut everything but essence, Peruvian guava ripened by flies, the sharp destiny of a mother that can be wrapped in banana leaves. A dog facing a bookcase in the middle of a see-through ruins. The bookcase was the work of asthma. There was a spot for the old oil can, the bunch of basil, the goat tallow. Still the house curdled with books, the dust's bad temper, the punctual, capricious water leak. The dog was the work of nobody, a good swimmer, did it all till its dying breath, his ear bitten in the backwoods, Worms ate him alive. Now you do whatever you can to stop from howling.
Well, the last poems. I always read these poems, and my older son, he is a scientist. He's a
Physicist.
He's a physicist. Those words are
Yeah, it's
difficult
hard.
for me. And he's a physicist, and I try to have a good relationship with him, and I decide, well, let me study some physics, and I choose a theme, a subject, neutrino. I try to learn everything that possible about the neutrino, and I wrote this poem dedicated to him. And when I give the poem to him, he told me that, you have to study more about neutrino. And of course, I write the dedication to the poems, and I dedicate to a friend of mine, a very good Chilean poet, Jesus Sepúlveda. But I was invited to have a reading in Princeton, and there was a wonderful audience. And when I read these poems, a very old guy, almost unable to walk, approached to me and told me, "Can I give you a hug?" Yes. And we hug, and he told me, "Well, tell your son that he is absolutely wrong, that everything that you say about the neutrino is right. And the person who tells you that is the guy who discovered the neutrino and received in 1982 with Gabriel García Márquez the Nobel Prize in Physics." Okay? And this is the poem. Elogio del neutrino. Te celebro porque en el mundo nadie es más pequeño que tú, y sin embargo atraviesas galaxias, nebulosas, estrellas sin reaccionar con nadie. Porque aún siendo luz puedes moverte muchísimo más lento que la luz o descansar inmóvil corrigiendo la teoría de un universo caliente. Porque gracias a ti el pasado fue solo plasma recalentado y no cenizas. La densidad del plasma era de billones de toneladas por centímetro cúbico. Porque nadie sabía hasta ahora que eras el 97% de todo, quedando solo un 3% a repartir entre hijos de puta y demases. Porque gracias a ti nadie se aleja ya de nadie y todo tiende a unirse, y no importa que sea en una llama dura, en un punto radiante. Te celebro porque eres la esencia del espasmo, materia de ternura, o ese poco de nada con que mi tía dora sus natillas. No es infinito el mundo, como el verso está hecho de sílabas que es posible contar. El mundo cabe en un alejandrino.
Praise for the neutrino. I celebrate you because no one in the world is smaller, and still you cross galaxies, nebulas, stars not reacting. Because even as light you move much slower than light, or rest motionless, correcting the theory of a warming universe. Because thanks to you the past was only reheated plasma and not ashes. Plasma's density reached billions of tons by cubic centimeter. Because no one knew until now, you were 97% of everything, leaving only 3 to be divided up among sons of bitches and the rest. Because thanks to you, no one's far from anyone now, and everything tends to join, and it doesn't matter if in a solid flame at a radiant point. I celebrate you because you are essence of spasm, matter of tenderness, or that tiny bit of nothing my aunt uses to brown her custards. Thank God the world isn't infinite. Like a verse, it's made up of syllables that can be counted. the world fits in an Alexandrin.
Right, we have time out. Hey,
Whoa.
time out.
Okay. Perfect timing.
If
Thank-
you have any question,
I just asked the question. When you decided to become a poet, how old were you and what was the response that your family had? And what was it acceptable that you were, a child who was born in a farm was going to be a poet? Was that acceptable?
yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I didn't receive too much. My grandma, every time that I have to return to the house, I had mud in my shoes, and I have to immediately clean the shoes because I have to use the other day. My grandma tell me all the time, you don't want to clean your shoes anymore? Study. And I think that they were happy about what I...
No, I just wanted to add that I think he had his own prejudices more than his family. I think that he did not want to be a poet. He wanted to be a short story writer. Poets were effeminate. He was a macho. And so, I didn't know him at the time. These are all based on stories from him. But it took another poet who, as a mentor, who said to him, these are not short stories, these are poems. You need to write poetry, to convince him to do it. He did not want to be a poet.
Yeah, because in my short story, nothing happened. That's, you cannot write a short story without a plot. And nothing happened. You have a really nice language, you have everything here, but that's not short story. Even she write, in verse, one of my short story, removing some kind of prose. And you cannot escape from your destiny. That's...
Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Oh, another question.
I just wanted to ask you one question. You were telling me yesterday that in Cuba you have huge audiences for poetry. Even an audience of something like 5,000 stuff.
Right.
It's not uncommon.
A typical run for a
Why is it so? Why is there this traction in poetry in Cuba when you can see such a sparse audience here?
Well, yeah, I can tell you that a typical first run of a book of poetry is about 5,000. So, and that's been reduced now because of the economic issues. But I'll let Victor address the question of why poetry in Cuba.
Well, this is our major expression, we have wonderful novelists, we have wonderful essays, but poets establish, from the beginning, what is really the expression of the build of an identity, the national identity. All those things happen in poetry that they don't happen in any novel. And why that happened, I don't know. Really. There are many explanations, but any of them is consistent. It's really, I don't believe in those explanations.
I will say, though, that I think it does have to do with kind of what Victor was talking about in terms of, the lack of commercialization, right? Poetry is something that's spoken on the streets. Poetry is profoundly oral in Cuba. People speak in rhyme and in meter often. It's just an intense part of Cuban culture. And this has been before the revolution, right? This has been always, but it's always been very intimately tied to an expression of independence, cultural independence, particularly from the United States. This has been the basis of decolonization. The cultural manifestation of decolonization in Cuba has been consistently poetry. And so there is this relationship, I think, between economics, politics, and the way that the culture has been formed.
My first book, the edition was the 20,000 copy, And that was because I was a young poet, nobody know me, and they published my first book. You know, and in 1 year was sold out. I only have one copy of that book.